What would you do if the man everyone feared was the only one who could save your life? That was the question Eleanor Hart faced. The moment she saw the buzzards circling over the desert, the sun glared down like a merciless eye over the Arizona territory, turning every breath into fire. Eleanor bent over her small herb garden beside her lonely cabin, wiping sweat from her brow as wilted sage and feverfew begged for water she could not spare. It was 1878, and the land 3 miles from the town of Redemption was as harsh as any battlefield she had served on. People in town crossed the street when she walked by. Some whispered that she had been too close to death during the war. Others said a woman who could stitch wounds and set bones was unnatural. They still came begging for help when fevers burned or babies came early, but they never stayed long enough to thank her. Eleanor straightened and looked across the red sweep of desert. Skeleton Ridge shimmered under the heat, its jagged outline wavering like a fever dream. That was when she noticed the buzzards, black specks circling lazily in the sky. Something was dying. Or someone. She told herself to ignore it. There was enough trouble in her life. But even as she argued with her own mind, her body was already moving toward the cabin. She grabbed her old cavalry saddlebag filled with medical supplies, slung her father's Spencer rifle over her shoulder, and filled her canteen. The desert spoke in its own quiet language. She heard the whisper of shifting sand, the soft rustle of a sidewinder, the far-off cry of a hawk. But then she heard something else, something that made her heart slam hard in her chest. A human voice. Low, weak, delirious. She found the man wedged between 2 sun-baked boulders at the base of the ridge, curled in the thin shade they offered. He was big, lean, and dangerous-looking. His black duster was torn, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, and sweat and blood stained his shirt. A bullet wound near his ribs had soaked the fabric dark. Eleanor knelt beside him, checking him like she had checked 1,000 dying soldiers. Her fingers found a Colt, .45 in his holster, a knife in his boot, and another pistol hidden at his back. This man lived by the gun, or was running from someone who did. "Mister," she said softly, touching his shoulder, "can you hear me?" His eyes snapped open, ice blue, sharp as winter. In a single fluid motion, his hand clamped around her wrist with the strength of a striking rattler. "Easy," Eleanor said, forcing calm into her voice even as her pulse thundered. "I'm here to help." His gaze studied her with the cold focus of a man used to danger. Slowly, his grip loosened. "You're the healing woman from Redemption." His voice was rough, dry as sandpaper. "Eleanor Hart," she said. "And you're bleeding all over my desert." A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. Jesse Blackthorne. The name hit her like a blow. Jesse Blackthorne, the man accused of killing 3 men in Tucson. The half-Apache outlaw with a price on his head that could buy a ranch. Sheriff Clay McGraw had been bragging for months that he'd driven him out of the county. But the man lying before her didn't look like a killer fleeing justice. He looked like someone who had crawled his last mile. "That wound won't get better on its own," Eleanor said. "Can you ride?" he asked, attempting to shift and biting back a groan. "Because I can barely breathe." She knew what she should do: leave him, walk away, pretend she never found him. Instead, she said the words that would change everything. "I'll bring the wagon." His hand shot out again, catching hers. Why? Such a small question, such a complicated answer, because she had seen too much death. Because he looked at her with eyes that saw more truth than any man in town. Because she was tired of loneliness and judgment. But all she said was, "Because those buzzards look hungry, and I'm particular about what dies on my land." This time his smile was real, surprisingly boyish. Practical woman. Eleanor hurried back for the wagon, her heart pounding for reasons she didn't dare name. When she returned, Jesse had managed to prop himself up, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Loading him took all her strength, but she had lifted grown men twice his size on battlefields back east. They rattled toward her cabin under the burning sun, every bump tearing a groan from Jesse's throat as he fought to stay conscious. By the time she dragged him inside and laid him on her sturdy table, her arms felt like lead. "This will hurt," she warned. Can't be worse than getting shot, he muttered. She cleaned the wound. He gripped the table until his knuckles were white, sweat dripping from his brow, but he never cried out. She stitched him, her hands steady from years of war. She saw other scars, too. Old ones, deep ones, the kinds that left stories carved into skin. You've been shot before, she said. He smiled faintly. Occupational hazard. By the time she bandaged him, Jesse was fading fast. Eleanor supported him to her small bed, the only bed in the cabin. She told herself she could sleep by the stove, as she had done many nights during the war. He stared up at her, his voice barely a whisper. Why? She pulled a blanket over him. Ask me again when you're not dying. He was already unconscious. Outside, the desert wind moaned against the cabin walls, rattling them like bones. Tomorrow, the town would whisper. Tomorrow, Sheriff McGraw would come looking. Tomorrow, everything she had built could crumble. But tonight, she had a patient. Tonight, she had Jesse Blackthorne in her bed. And deep in her heart, Eleanor Hart sensed that nothing in her life would ever be the same. What if the man you were trying to save refused to save himself? That question echoed in Eleanor Hart's mind long before dawn broke over the Arizona desert. For 2 nights, she barely slept, tending Jesse Blackthorne as fever gripped him hard. She changed cold cloths, forced willow bark tea past his lips, and prayed the infection would not take him. She had watched too many men slip away in her arms during the war. She would not watch another die on her table. Not if she could fight it. On the 3rd morning, just as her eyelids drooped in her chair beside his bed, a low voice rasped out. You trying to drown me, woman? Quote. Eleanor jerked upright. Jesse was awake, lucid. Color had returned to his skin, and though pain still pinched his brow, his blue eyes were clear. Trying to keep your brains from boiling, she retorted, relief loosening her shoulders. Though I'm not sure there's much in there worth saving. He tried to laugh and winced. Fair. She helped him sit up enough to drink. His pride kept him from leaning into her more than necessary, but she felt the tremble in his arms. He was still weak. Too weak. Most folks would say you're making a dangerous choice harboring a wanted man, he said. And most folks don't know the difference between justice and gossip, Eleanor answered. Jesse's gaze wandered around the cabin, taking in the dried herbs hanging from the rafters and the daguerreotype of her late husband on the mantel. Your husband. Samuel Hart? Eleanor nodded, lost to an Apache raid 2 winters ago. I'm sorry, Jesse said quietly, genuine, gentle, nothing personal. Just the way things are out here. Jesse's jaw tightened. My mother's people would say the same. She was Chiricahua, my father Irish. I grew up between worlds, never fit in either. Eleanor listened in silence as she changed his bandages. The wound was healing well. No red streaking, no foul smell. You'll live, she said. That's up to you, he replied. But Eleanor had no time to answer because footsteps crunched outside, approaching fast. Her heart slammed. Eleanor grabbed her rifle, motioning for Jesse to stay quiet. She slipped to the window and peered out. Only Rosa Delgado, barefoot, shawl drawn tight around her shoulders, face pale. Eleanor opened the door before the girl knocked. Ellie, Rosa whispered. The sheriff's asking questions. Folks seen you buying more medical supplies. He thinks you're hiding someone. Eleanor's blood ran cold. He'll come here? Yes, Rosa said. Soon. Eleanor shut the door, leaned her head against it for a moment, then turned to Jesse. You can't leave, she said. And I can't stay, he replied. You can barely stand. Better than bringing trouble to your door. She stepped toward him, anger flaring. Trouble found me the moment I pulled you out of that desert. Running won't fix anything. Jesse's eyes softened. I won't let you lose everything because of me. Too late, Eleanor snapped. I already chose. The room went quiet. Jesse exhaled, defeated. Then we need a plan. The next days became a strange rhythm. Jesse healing. Eleanor fighting to keep him from overexerting. She woke one morning to find him trying to chop wood outside, gripping the axe with one hand, stubborn as a mule. She snatched it out of his hands. "You'll tear your stitches." "I'm not an invalid." "No, you're a fool." He grinned through his pain. "Anyone ever tell you you're bossy?" "Frequently. Never stopped me before." Their closeness grew in small moments, shared smiles, hands brushing, silence that felt safe. Then the blizzard hit. The storm came without warning, sweeping across the desert like a white wall. Eleanor had just finished feeding the animals when the sky darkened. She barely made it to the barn before the wind hit like a fist. A mule brayed in panic, snow cut across her face like knives. She staggered against the storm. Jesse was alone in the cabin. Eleanor wrapped her shawl tighter and plunged into the chaos. The cold hit her lungs so hard she choked. The world turned white. She could not see, could not breathe, could not tell ground from sky. Then a hand grabbed her, strong, warm, pulling her out of the storm. Jesse, coatless, barefoot. "You fool woman!" he shouted over the howling wind. "You'll freeze!" He dragged her toward the cabin, guiding them blind through the whiteout. She collapsed inside, shaking uncontrollably. Snow dusted her hair and clothes. "Strip," Jesse ordered, voice shaking. "Those wet clothes will kill you." Her fingers wouldn't move. Jesse cursed softly and unbuttoned her dress with fast, careful hands, peeling the soaked fabric away. He wrapped her in blankets, rubbing warmth into her arms. "You came out there without boots?" she managed, through chattering teeth. "Wasn't gonna let you die," he said simply. "What kind of man would I be then?" The fire crackled, but the cold inside the cabin deepened. Jesse's wound had reopened. Blood stained his shirt. "Sit," she ordered. "You're bleeding again." Jesse sat with a groan. Eleanor cleaned and bandaged him again, her hands brushing warm skin, her pulse jumping at every accidental touch. Cold pressed deeper into her bones. She shivered hard. Jesse frowned. "Your dress is still damp. You need warmth." "I can't reach the trunk," she admitted. "Hands won't work." Jesse hesitated, then said quietly, "I can help if you want." Practical, necessary, but intimate in a way neither had dared before. "All right," she whispered. He kept his touch respectful, clinical even, as he helped her work the remaining damp fabric away. But when her skin brushed his warm hands, she gasped, "Your hands are like fire." "Good or bad?" Quote, "Good." So good. The blankets slipped. Their faces were inches apart. The fire glowed gold around them. Her breath trembled. "Ellie," Jesse whispered, voice rough, "tell me to stop." She didn't. She leaned into him, drawn helplessly. "I'm tired of being careful," she whispered. "Tear my dress." Quote. His breath caught. "Darling," he growled softly, "I'll burn with you tonight." And he did. Every moment, every touch of fire that melted the ice in her chest. They found each other in the warmth of the blankets, in the glow of the fire, in the safety of two lonely souls finally letting go. When it was over, Eleanor rested against him, listening to his heart. "What happens when the storm ends?" she whispered. "I don't know," he said honestly. But she realized something as she lay there. She didn't want him to leave. Not now. Not ever. Silas Boone's men arrived 3 days later, and they brought hell with them. What would you risk if the person you loved was marked for death? Eleanor Hart found her answer the moment she saw Silas Boone and Sheriff Clay McGraw ride into her yard with 8 armed men. Dust swirled around the horses, hooves as they circled the cabin like wolves. McGraw held a torch high, its flame flickering across his hard face. Boone sat beside him, pale eyes cold, lips twisted in a smile that never reached them. "Well now," Boone drawled, "the widow Hart didn't take you for the type to harbor a fugitive." Eleanor stepped forward. "What do you want, Mr. Boone?" "Your land," Boone said simply, "and the man you're hiding." "It's my husband's claim," she said. "Filed proper, you know that." "Dead men don't own anything," Boone replied. "And women? Women don't fare much better, not in the eyes of the law." Jesse moved to stand beside her, his hand resting on his Colt. "She's got someone to speak for her now," he said. McGraw laughed. "Jesse Blackthorne, the half-breed killer, thought we'd chased you out for good." Eleanor felt Jesse tense, but she stepped closer, her voice iron steady. "He's not going with you." "He will," Boone said. 3 days. He comes willingly, and maybe your cabin stays where it is. But if he doesn't," Boone gestured casually toward her barn, her well, her home. "Accidents happen in this territory." Their threats hung like storm clouds as they rode away. Eleanor turned on Jesse the moment they disappeared over the ridge. "You're not going." "Ellie?" "No," she snapped. "They'll kill you." Quote, "And if I stay, they'll destroy you." He cupped her face gently. "I won't let them take everything from you." "Then we fight," Eleanor said. Jesse blinked. "Fight?" "Yes." She straightened. "If Boone wants a war, then we make sure he regrets it." Jesse stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Darlin, you don't know what you're getting into." "I know this," she said. "I'm done being afraid." And she meant every word. That night, Rosa Delgado slipped in through the back door, her apron covered in dust. "Boone's gathering men from every direction," she whispered. "But people in town are whispering too. Your stand, it's giving them courage." "Courage won't stop bullets," Jesse said. "No," Eleanor said, "but numbers might." "Rosa, how many would help us?" "More than you think," Rosa said. "Farmers Boone threatened, families he stole land from, people he pushed around." Eleanor nodded. "Then we gather them." Jesse frowned. "Ellie, you're talking about raising a militia." "I'm talking about defending what's ours," she said. "Defending the truth." Quote. He was quiet for a long moment. Then a slow, dangerous smile formed. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see what trouble we can stir." On the night before Boone's deadline, redemption fell silent. But it was not fear, it was preparation. Men and women took hidden positions along the street. Behind water troughs, on rooftops, in doorways. The forgotten, the displaced, the ones Boone had stepped on for years. They waited. When dawn stained the sky pink, the thunder of hooves shook the ground. Boone rode at the head of nearly 20 men. McGraw beside him. Guns, torches, anger. "Jesse Blackthorne!" McGraw yelled. "Time's up!" Jesse stood on the hotel roof, rifle steady. "I'm right here," he called. "But I'm not going anywhere with you." Boone urged his horse forward. "You think you can beat me?" "I own this county." "No," Eleanor said, stepping into the street. "You've only ever owned its fear." McGraw sneered. "You talk big for a woman breaking the law." "Is it breaking the law to tell the truth?" Eleanor lifted her voice. "Silas Boone murdered Tom Martinez. He burned out the Paiute camp at Willow Creek. He paid men in Tucson to kill Jesse Blackthorne." Gasps rippled through the watching townsfolk. Angry murmurs rose from every shadow. "You can't prove any of that," Boone snapped. "Can't we?" Eleanor lifted a leather folder. "Your own handwriting, Mr. Boone. Your own accounts. Your own orders." Boone's face went white. McGraw's hand dropped to his gun, but Judge Thornberry's voice cut through the tension. "I have a federal warrant for the arrest of Silas Boone." The street erupted. Boone panicked, drawing his weapon. Jesse moved before anyone else. McGraw fired. Jesse fired back. Gunshots cracked through the morning air. Dust exploded around Eleanor's boots. She dove behind a trough, heart pounding. Shouts rose. Bullets flew. The air filled with smoke and fear. Redemption fought back. Miguel Delgado's men charged. Rosa called orders in Spanish. Father O'Reilly's shotgun boomed. Apache scouts joined with deadly precision. Within minutes, Boone's men broke. Some ran. Some surrendered. McGraw faced Jesse in the street, their guns raised in a final deadly standoff. "You were a lawman once," Jesse said. "What happened to you?" "Money happened," McGraw growled. "Power happened." McGraw fired first. Jesse's bullet hit true. McGraw fell, shock frozen on his face. Silas Boone didn't get far. Townsfolk surrounded him, dragging him down. His rein broke like brittle wood. When the dust finally settled, redemption exhaled for the first time in years. Jesse collapsed against a post, blood oozing from a graze. "You're hit," Eleanor cried, rushing to him. "Just a scratch," he muttered. McGraw was always slow. She tore his shirt open, relieved to find the wound shallow. "You scared me half to death." He caught her hand, held it. "Ellie," he said softly, "it's over." "No," she said, tears in her eyes. It's beginning. 6 months later, the town courthouse overflowed. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows as Father O'Reilly stood before Eleanor and Jesse, now in a deputy's badge. Judge Thornberry read from a paper. "The charges against Jesse Blackthorne are hereby dismissed. In fact, the territory recommends him for service as a federal lawman." Jesse squeezed Eleanor's hand. Then, before their friends, their town, before Rosa, Miguel, Doc Finch, Sarah Standing Bear, Jesse and Eleanor spoke their vows. When the kiss came, the whole town cheered. Love had survived. Justice had won. Redemption had earned its name. At sunset, they walked toward their rebuilt cabin, hand in hand. It had been expanded with 2 new rooms. Fresh herbs grew in the garden. A rocking chair waited by the stove. "Any regrets?" Jesse asked quietly. "Not one," Eleanor answered. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold. "Darlin," he whispered against her ear, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving you were right to take a chance on me. And I'll spend mine making sure you never bleed in my desert again," she said, smiling. They closed the door behind them as the desert wind carried the scent of rain and new beginnings. 2 hearts had found their home. Together, now and always.